When we talk about how Netflix destroyed its biggest opponent, the first thing we have to understand is that this wasn't just a battle of two companies. It was a battle between two completely different ways of thinking about entertainment. On one side, you had the old guard, video rental giants who built their empire on physical stores, late fees, and the idea that the customer would come to them. On the other side, you had Netflix, a company that saw the winds of change before most people even noticed the storm brewing. Netflix understood something simple but incredibly powerful. Convenience wasn't just a selling point, it was the future. People didn't want to spend time driving to a store, browsing shelves, hoping the movie they wanted wasn't already checked out, then rushing back the next day to avoid late fees. That whole process might have been fine in the 90s, but technology was moving fast and the world was already shifting towards instant access. Netflix positioned itself to be the first to truly deliver that on a massive scale. In the early days, Netflix disrupted the game with its DVD by mail service. At the time, that alone was revolutionary. Instead of making multiple trips to a store, you could order movies online and have them delivered straight to your door. No late fees, no pressure. You watched at your own pace and sent them back when you were ready. This alone was enough to make customers rethink why they were putting up with the hassle of traditional rentals. But Netflix didn't stop there. They recognized that this wasn't the end goal, it was just the beginning. The true game changer came when they shifted from mailing DVD to offering on-demand streaming. Suddenly, the wait time was gone entirely. You didn't just avoid the store, you avoided the mailbox too. All it took was an internet connection, and in seconds you could be watching your favorite movie or binging an entire season of a show. This was the moment when their biggest opponent started to crumble. The traditional rental model simply couldn't match the speed and ease of streaming. It wasn't just about having movies available, it was about making them available right now. Netflix had taken the idea of convenience and stretched it to its absolute limit, creating an experience that customers quickly became addicted to. Once people got used to instant streaming, going back to the old way felt like going from a smartphone back to a rotary phone. Another critical part of this transformation was accessibility across multiple devices. Netflix didn't confine viewers to their living room TV. They made sure their platform worked on laptops, tablets, smartphones, and eventually even gaming consoles and smart TV. This meant your entertainment traveled with you, on the bus, in bed, during lunch breaks, anywhere you wanted it. That kind of freedom was unheard of in the video rental era. The opponent's physical stores couldn't compete with something that fit in your pocket. And it's important to note that Netflix didn't just make watching easier. They also removed the pain points that customers had grudgingly accepted for years. Remember late fees? Remember late fees? That slow walk of shame to the counter when you realized you forgot to return a movie on time? Gone. Remember showing up at the store only to see every copy of the new release already rented? Gone. Netflix gave people not just more convenience but also more certainty. The movie you wanted was always there, waiting for you. What's more, the pricing model made it even harder for the competition to survive. Instead of paying per rental, Netflix offered unlimited viewing for a flat monthly fee. This made the decision to subscribe almost a no-brainer. Customers didn't have to think about each movie's cost. They just pressed play. That psychological shift, removing the mental transaction for every movie, kept people watching more and staying subscribed longer. In effect, Netflix redefined what a movie night meant. It was no longer a single trip to the store followed by a single movie. It became an entire library at your fingertips, ready to be explored at any time. That's why this change wasn't just a technological upgrade. It was a lifestyle change. Once people experienced it, they didn't want to go back. Now, here's the critical part. Their biggest service, We're talking about a fundamental shift in consumer expectations. Huh? Netflix didn't just give people an easier way to watch movies. They made that level of convenience the new standard. And once customers had tasted that, they refused to settle for anything less. This was the first major strike in a war Netflix would go on to win decisively. More by removing every friction point, giving instant access anywhere, and replacing parental costs with unlimited viewing, Netflix didn't just compete with their opponent, they made the opponent's entire business model obsolete. Now, if convenience was Netflix's opening move in this battle, then data was their secret weapon. The one their biggest opponent didn't even realize was being used until it was far too late. Convenience got people through the door, but it was Netflix's mastery of data that kept them from ever leaving. Traditional video rental giants built their business on a fairly simple concept. Stock the titles that were popular, display them prominently, and hope customers picked something before they got bored of browsing. It was a guessing game. Sure, they had some idea of what sold well. They could see which DVDs were constantly checked out, but that's a blunt instrument. It told them what people liked after the fact, and only in broad strokes. Netflix changed that. From the moment you pressed play, paused, skipped ahead, abandoned a movie halfway through, or binged 3 episodes in one sitting, Netflix was learning. Every click, every choice, every moment of engagement became part of a massive, constantly growing dataset. This wasn't just information, it was insight. Instead of making vague guesses about what the market wants, Netflix could see exactly what you wanted. They knew if you preferred comedies with a strong female lead, crime dramas set in the 80s, or documentaries under 90 minutes. And they didn't just store this information, they used it in real time. The next time you opened the app, your recommendations weren't random. They were laser targeted to match your unique tastes. This was personalization at a level their opponent couldn't touch. Walking into a rental store, you were at the mercy of the shelves. If you ask a clerk for a recommendation, you might get a suggestion based on whatever they personally liked or whatever just came in that week. Netflix replaced that with an algorithm that acted like it had known you your whole life. And here's the thing, the more you watched, the better it got. But Netflix didn't stop at simply recommending existing content. They used this data to shape the future of their entire library. This is where the opponent truly fell behind. While traditional companies relied on licensing deals and seasonal stocking, Netflix started using viewer data to decide what new shows and movies to create. Think about it. They didn't greenlight a house of cards on a hunch. They knew that political dramas performed well, that Kevin Spacey was popular with their audience, and that fans of the original British version were likely to binge a well-produced remake. By combining those insights, Netflix wasn't gambling on original content. They were making calculated, high-confidence bets. The same happened with shows like Stranger Things. Data revealed a hunger for nostalgic small-town mystery stories with supernatural twists, especially among audiences who enjoyed both 80s pop culture and science fiction. The show's format, tone, and even release timing were influenced by patterns Netflix had observed. This meant they weren't just meeting demand, they were anticipating it. Meanwhile, their biggest opponent was still choosing what to offer based on limited rental history and the vague hope that blockbuster titles would draw people in. They weren't collecting fine-grained behavioral data, and even if they had been, they lacked the digital infrastructure to act on it quickly. Netflix's ability to pivot instantly gave them a massive speed advantage. They could spot a trend emerging and serve it to viewers before the competition even knew it existed. Another subtle but powerful use of data was in content presentation. Netflix didn't just recommend a title. They tailored the way it appeared to you. The thumbnail image you saw for a show might be completely different from the one your friend saw. based on what each of you responded to in the past. Dreamer, if you tended to click on shows featuring certain actors, your version of the thumbnail would highlight that actor. If you gravitated toward action scenes, you'd see a more dynamic, high-energy still. This might seem minor, but in an attention economy, those micro-optimizations can mean the difference between someone watching or scrolling past. All of this data-driven refinement created a feedback loop. The better Netflix's recommendations, the more people watched. The more they watched, the more data Netflix had. The more data they had, the sharper their recommendations became. This loop didn't just keep viewers engaged, it kept them logged in. Once you were accustomed to having a platform that seemed to adhere to you, switching to a competitor that felt impersonal and clumsy was unthinkable. It's worth noting that while Netflix was building this data empire, their biggest opponent wasn't just behind, they were standing still. Their model relied heavily on physical transactions, which meant they couldn't collect the same volume or quality of behavioral information. Even if they tried to copy Netflix's streaming service, they'd be starting from zero in terms of personalization. And without that personalization, customers had no reason to prefer them over the company that already knew their tastes inside and out. So while the first key point, accessibility and convenience, explains how Netflix pulled ahead, this second point shows why the gap between them and their opponent kept widening. It wasn't enough to have the movies people wanted. Netflix figured out exactly how to deliver the right content to the right person at the right time, and they used that precision to keep viewers hooked. By the time their opponent tried to adapt, Netflix had something far more valuable than a large catalog or competitive pricing. They had deep, actionable knowledge of their audience. That knowledge became the foundation for everything that followed. Their investment in originals, their ability to dominate new genres, and eventually their global expansion. And that brings us to the final chapter in this story. How Netflix took these advantages and scaled them worldwide, cementing their victory and making it nearly impossible for their biggest opponent to recover. We've seen how Netflix revolutionized convenience and how they weaponized data to deliver an experience that felt almost tailor-made for each viewer. But the final blow that truly destroyed their biggest opponent wasn't just about keeping current customers happy, it was about thinking bigger than anyone else. Netflix didn't just want to dominate a single market, they wanted to change how the entire world watched entertainment. And they were willing to innovate relentlessly to make it happen. While their opponent was still trying to fix problems at home, Netflix was already laying the groundwork for a global takeover. They understood something fundamental. The future of streaming wasn't going to be a local story, it was going to be an international one. And whoever reached global scale first would control the conversation, the market, and, most importantly, the culture. The first step in that plan was technical. Expanding into dozens of countries isn't just a matter of flipping a switch. Netflix had to build an infrastructure that could stream high-quality video reliably in places with vastly different internet speeds, devices, and viewing habits. So they invested heavily in compression technology, adaptive streaming, and server networks that made their platform usable almost anywhere. Whether you are watching in New York City on high-speed fiber or in a small town with a modest connection, Netflix worked. That technical consistency became part of their brand's trust, and it was something their opponent couldn't replicate quickly enough. Next came the content strategy. Netflix knew that simply dumping Hollywood movies into foreign markets wouldn't win hearts everywhere. Instead, they began producing and licensing local content in different regions, shows in the languages people spoke, reflecting the cultures they lived in. And here's the smart part. They didn't just make these local shows for local audiences, they also positioned them to reach global viewers. Look at hits like A Money Heisty from Spain, A Darka from Germany, or A Squid Game from South Korea. These weren't just local successes, they became global phenomena watched by millions across continents. Netflix turned the idea of a foreign content on its head. For decades, entertainment had flowed mostly one way, from Hollywood out to the rest of the world. Netflix flipped the script, proving that a gripping story could capture audiences anywhere, regardless of language. This global content loop also fed back into their data-driven model. By studying viewing habits across countries, Netflix could see trends emerging worldwide. They could tell if a Brazilian drama was unexpectedly popular in Canada, or if a Japanese anime series had a sudden spike in the UK. This meant they weren't just reacting to culture, they were helping to shape it, exporting hits from one region to another faster than any traditional distributor could dream of. Meanwhile, their biggest opponent was still largely stuck in a domestic mindset, trying to patch up declining store traffic and salvage a business model that was becoming irrelevant. Even when they finally tried to enter streaming, they didn't have the international infrastructure, the global brand recognition, or the content pipeline to compete at Netflix's scale. Netflix had already planted flags in dozens of markets, built partnerships with local creators, and become a household name worldwide. The gap was no longer just wide, it was unbridgeable. But Netflix's innovation didn't stop at global expansion. They kept pushing the platform forward in ways that made competitors feel perpetually behind. They invested in features like personalized trailers, interactive storytelling experiments such as a Bandersnatch, and even gaming content to keep people engaged in new ways. Every time their opponent tried to catch up, Netflix had already moved on to the next frontier. Another key advantage was device integration. Netflix was proactive about making sure their app wasn't just on your laptop or phone, it was on your smart TV, your game console, your streaming stick, even pre-installed on new devices. That meant in many parts of the world, people's first experience with streaming wasn't a which service should I try. It was a Netflix is already here. Let's start watching. That kind of distribution dominance is incredibly hard to break once it's established. The psychological effect of all this was massive. Netflix stopped being just a service you subscribe to. It became the default way to watch. In many countries, a Netflix even became shorthand for streaming itself. Their biggest opponent never came close to owning that kind of cultural mindshare. So when we look at how Netflix destroyed their largest competitor, this final point ties everything together. Convenience got people in the door, data kept them hooked. But it was relentless innovation and aggressive global expansion that slammed the door shut on the competition for good. By the time their opponent realized what was happening, Netflix wasn't just a US-based streaming service. They were an entertainment ecosystem, a platform producing global hits, available anywhere on nearly any device, powered by technology and insights no competitor could match. The war was over even if the opponent didn't want to admit it. And here's the takeaway. Netflix didn't win by being lucky. They won because they understood that industries aren't disrupted in a single moment. They're disrupted by a series of moves that build on each other. Moves that make it harder and harder for anyone else to keep up. First, they removed the pain points of the old model. Then they mastered personalization through data. Finally, they scaled and innovated so aggressively that their lead became permanent. In doing so, Netflix didn't just defeat their biggest opponent, they changed the rules for everyone who came after. And in the process, they showed that in the world of entertainment, the future belongs to those who can see beyond the present, embrace change before it's comfortable, and think globally from day one.